This is Tonight. I'm Bruce Whitfield. Welcome to the show, and we're exploring ways to make money out of students. They're a lucrative crowd and they need to stay somewhere. Universities finding it increasingly tough to provide enough student accommodation. Two guys making bucks out of students. Well, the first one is Ndumiso Davidson, Chief Executive of South Point, and Lesiba Mooka, who is the Chief Executive of Cobalt Blue Properties. Let's start with you first, Ndumiso. It's good to have you on the show this evening. How many properties have you got? How many students are you able to accommodate?
At the moment, Bruce, we have 40 properties across the country. 25 of them are in Braamfontein, and we accommodate 10,000 students across the country, and 5,000 of those students are in Braamfontein, from Wits and UJ.
Okay, so I mean it's a big spread. How long have you guys been in this game?
South Point's been in student accommodation for South Point's been in accommodation for about 12 years now, and began in Braamfontein with about 2 buildings, and that's grown to 25 buildings in Braamfontein.
It's all about demand, isn't it? I mean, you've grown to satisfy demand as many students have come from all over the country. Accommodation in short supply, old-fashioned residences don't really help, and digs accommodation is also very expensive. Student accommodation, where do you start in terms of rates?
Our most affordable rate is about 2,200. That's for 3 sharing, and it goes all the way up to about 5,000, and that's for apartments. So we have across the spectrum shared ablution all the way up to ensuite residential apartments.
Basically, it's outsourced student accommodation. The universities can't do it, so you guys are providing the service.
Exactly. So we exist to support the institution in as far as the student housing infrastructure, and we do so not by providing not only the infrastructure itself, but the supporting services and social and academic support infrastructure as well.
I mean, you must then look at the guys who come into the space, guy like Paul Lapham, who converted the grain silos in town, and Lesiba Mooka there next to you, with some contempt. Say, hold on a second, this is my turf. Butt out.
Not entirely, Bruce. I think the new entrants into the market help us from the perspective of creating a discerning student customer. So student accommodation historically has been characterized as exploitative. So you would find 4 to 6 people living in one room. The idea of creating a product of a particular quality in an environment that is conducive to students is one that will support an idea that students and their bursars should pay for product of value. And aside from that, I think the market itself is large enough for a number of competitors. We're all aware of the statistics around the shortfall of student accommodation. There's certainly enough space for everyone to play, everyone from the person with the back room to large corporate providers like ourselves.
Now, Lesiba Mooka, you are new to this particular game. You're the founder and chief executive of Cobalt Blue Properties. Like Ndumiso, 12 years ago, you've got 2 properties. You're new in this game. What's it like competing against the big dogs?
Sure. Those guys, they've got the big piece of the pie. But slowly but surely, we are coming up. We've been looking out for more properties within the same, Braamfontein where they're operating. And slowly but surely, there's progress. Hopefully in the next couple of years, we should be more or less on the same level as them.
Where does funding come from something like this, Lesiba? You're starting out post-financial crisis. Banks are terrified of lending money to their own mothers. How are you getting the money to acquire properties, renovate the properties, many of which will be badly run down, to a standard where you can compete?
Okay, on our side, our business model is mostly focused on property sales. So we are playing it big on the trading side of things. So some of the proceeds from there, that's what we use to acquire those properties. So we still have to sell a couple of properties around like the East Rand and your Mid-Rand areas. So proceeds from those sales, that's what we use to actually pump money into this, looking into residential properties for students in the Braamfontein and Newtown areas.
But that new town, Braamfontein node, if you like, is really coming back to life. It's getting a really nice, vibrant culture about it. You've got lots of people walking the streets even after dark, and it almost feels, does it not, Ndumiso, like a real city again. You must have seen a considerable transformation over the 12 years since you first invested there to the environment in which you've helped create today.
Yes, it's been phenomenal to see the change that's happened in Braamfontein, and we've been instrumental in driving that change. So for us, the idea of conducive quality student accommodation is an idea we've extended into the streets. So we've been proponents and drivers of this change. So much so that we've invested in elements that are not necessarily core, like Landlords and Lemuni Hotel, but are integral in terms of creating an ecosystem that works and ultimately a lifestyle for students. So for us, our focus is saying, students shouldn't be subjected to the worst parts of the city. Let's create a student precinct where they will be part and parcel of the environment and the lifestyle and the transformation of the city.
How have you found finance? How have you found the accessibility to finance for projects like this over the last 12 years?
Our funding has come from funds that are focused on investing and supporting affordable housing, and student accommodation exists as a subset of that. So the Development Bank of South Africa were the first funders that invested significantly from their perspective. And more recently, the Housing Impact Fund of South Africa, managed by Old Mutual, have been big investors in student housing. And that's more from a debt side. From an equity perspective, South Point was acquired by a private equity firm called Loreko Metia, who were instrumental in providing the equity funding, as well as supporting some of the strategic initiatives of the company.
Lesiba,
Mooka, you're taking notes because I can see a growth path.
Yeah, definitely. Look, credit must be given to South Point. They just came into the market and just ran with it. The past, 10 to 12 years, like you said, has been actually quite good for them. And if you look at the growth today, is actually quite good. So we are taking notes, we are learning. And if you look at Braamfontein today, you go to Braamfontein, like you said, you can walk any time of the day, any time of the night. You go there on a Saturday afternoon, you can't find parking. It's super full, it's vibrant, it's more like your Melville 7th Street type of setup, but more filled with young professionals and students. So South Point did really do a good job. So yeah, hopefully we'll probably be in the same situation with them as them in the next couple of years.
When you look at the capacity of the universities, they've got a finite capacity. UJ can only take so many students, WITS can only take so many students. Is there not a risk here, Lesiba, of overcapitalizing in what seems to be quite a competitively traded market?
No. If you look at the institutions themselves, your VETs and your UJ, they themselves don't have capacity to actually hold most of this or house most of the students. The residents, although they are there, but they haven't actually built any new residents in the past years. You look at UJ in areas like your Auckland Park Kingsway, they're actually supporting landlords to actually convert their houses into communes, whereby students can actually have the same benefits as staying at their own campus residents. So it's actually quite encouraging from the institutions to actually support the drive for entrants like us to actually come into the market, provide more housing for their students so that, they can actually relieve off the pressure, that they actually had in the couple of years.
When you look at it, Ndumiso, you've got 25 properties in Braamfontein. You're accommodating half the students that you accommodate across the country, the 10,000 students you accommodate across the country. Are the demands similar in Cape Town, in Port Elizabeth, in Tshwane, for example, as you're seeing in Joburg?
The demand is there and in varying degrees. For us, we've taken a strategy in the markets outside of Braamfontein to enter into direct head leases. So we've mitigated risk from a leasing and occupancy standpoint in those particular cities. But the demand is certainly there, and the dynamics are similar. So our model is predicated on a brownfields model. So we buy underutilized and distressed properties and convert them into student accommodation. So the existence of underutilized properties at attractive prices, as well as the demand from a student side, exists in all the cities that we operate in. So the demand is present in all the cities which we operate in, but we've taken a different approach around kind of mitigation in these different areas.
Do you evolve this business into other accommodation? You've got a guy like Rennie Plitt, for example, who's been working extensively in inner city Johannesburg for the last decade and a half as well, buying up old buildings, converting old office buildings into residential accommodation, family accommodation. Is that part of the plan then, Ndumiso?
We have, as part of our portfolio in Johannesburg, 3 residential properties. And in the original kind of concept, the idea was, as students graduated from our traditional student property, is they would move into these apartments. What we've seen is students occupy those properties more and more. So the idea of students being relatively poor and not being able to afford residential apartments is one that we haven't seen. So for us, we think of our apartment accommodation as an extension of the spectrum of student accommodation that we provide. We do find in those buildings normal parents and families, but by and large we're finding, particularly in Braamfontein, that accommodation is being occupied by students. So there's no definitive strategy to cater to the market that AFCO does. We see the opportunity more of providing, let's call it, higher-end student accommodation to students.
It's absolutely wonderful story, and it's part of the big urban regeneration of not only inner city Johannesburg, but Braamfontein, Newtown, and in other parts of the country as well, which have got academic institutions where there's not enough accommodation. These are the guys who are helping uplift, if introducing students into a community is upliftment, but it is good to see life returning in a positive way to so many of these places, which for the last decade or two have been pretty downtrodden. Ndumiso Davidson is Chief Executive of South Point. Thank you so much for joining us. And Lesiba Mooka, who is the Chief Executive of Cobalt Blue Properties. Thanks to both of you for joining us from Johannesburg this evening. I'm Bruce Whitfield in Cape Town. There'll be more tonight, tomorrow. Till then, bye-bye.